G'day guys, Andrew Lutzy here,
John Cunningham.
and welcome to another edition of the Friday Takeout. We're going to be covering off some really cool stuff today to give you in the marketplace some clarity on how to buy and of course sell property and debunk a few of those myths around agent talk, some of the fun stuff, John.
Yeah, legal stuff as well.
Yeah.
You call that fun?
Yeah, I think the legal stuff.
Absolutely.
There's so many things that people talk about in the marketplace, and they get a bit bamboozled by terminology that's used in the marketplace, and rightly or wrongly, there's stuff you need to know as a buyer, but there's also stuff that agents use sometimes that can cloud your judgment.
What agents speak?
Agent talk.
Yeah,
Agent talk.
yeah.
So we're gonna let you in the
It can be confusing.
Yes.
So clarity is the word, isn't it? So what's clarity mean? Do you think means to a buyer and seller? What's it about?
I think the biggest frustration most buyers have, and also sellers, is where do we stand? Where is the sentiment in the market, and what does it mean to me? Because I want to make a positive decision on buying a property, and I don't want to buy something when I'm the only buyer. But equally, I don't want the wool pulled over my eyes either by things in the contract that might be pitfalls.
So you really need to know where you stand. So it's like saying, okay, am I the only buyer? How do I know that? What's it about? So we talk about transparency, don't we? We talk about transparency leading to clarity. We talk about providing great information leads to clarity. At the end of the day, it all leads to actually making a good decision, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Both for a buyer and a seller.
Yeah.
You can't make a great decision unless you actually know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, without spending huge amounts of money going to your solicitor every time you have a look at a contract, that's where a lot of people can come unstuck as well, both from a buyer and a seller.
Yeah.
It's about you being armed with the right information first, so you know the basic terms in which you're playing the game.
So where would you start? I mean, you take a first home buyer as opposed to what you call a sophisticated buyer.
Yeah.
And sometimes I come across sophisticated buyers that aren't that sophisticated.
Yes.
They've just sort of got to the place with a limited amount of knowledge, and when you actually open their mind up to see that. So it all starts, I suppose, when you're looking to buy pest and building reports, strata reports, understanding what's in a contract and what those implications are to you.
Yeah. And I think the problem we can sometimes have is both on the selling side and also buying side is they get a lot of bad information from very reliable sources. Mum and dad, the neighbour who's an expert, everyone is an expert in real estate.
Uncle Bill's probably the worst, isn't
he? He's bought and sold 10 properties. So, they've done this before, and it's good because they've got your good intentions at heart. And don't get me wrong, most people, when they're trying to help someone out and they're offering advice, they may have good intentions, but it just might be the wrong advice. So we're going to try and help give you some clarity around that. I think let's start with contracts.
Yep.
Because contracts are such a minefield for most people, but there is a basic contract that can be put together, or a vanilla contract if you like, which will give a buyer an understanding of what this property contains.
Yeah. So you got your sewage diagram. It tells you where the sewer line is, and it's important to understand that because there's some restrictions around how close you can build to a sewer line, whether it's the board's main sewer or the sewer connection from the house to the line. You then look at the title search. What's in that title search? And we come up with things like easements, rights of way, covenants, caveats.
And if we went back one step, what is, like for the viewers out there, what is an easement?
Yeah, so look, an easement is a restriction on land. It's a restriction of use of land. So it's a use that someone else may have, whether it be a right of way or a right of carriageway or a drainage easement or a sewage easement, anything of that nature. So it's a part of the land that has another purpose, not for just your peace and enjoyment. Right. So therefore, it can be a restriction of use. So you can have a covenant, for example, which stops the height of a building. Or the bulk of the building, or whatever it may be, that's been put on by the person who originally subdivided the land. And you come across those that are sometimes 100 years old and way past their use by. So what does that actually mean? But when you look at all those things, it's important to understand, okay, tell me, what does it mean? Now, solicitors are there for that purpose, conveyancers are there for that purpose. But what can be really good for buyers to actually understand is that when they're entering into potentially, say, a cooling off contract, which we'll go into in a bit more detail, they may not have the luxury of being able to actually get that advice sufficiently to make that decision.
Or before they have to make an offer.
Before that, exactly. So you've got to look at these things and understand what those implications are. The same in a strata title. When you look at a strata title and understand the difference between common property, exclusive use of common property, and what's on title. Sometimes garages are actually exclusive use. Sometimes garden spaces are exclusive use. And understanding what does that mean. Not making assumptions, in other words.
That's a big one, isn't it? I mean, for all the viewers out there who are buying, apartments and so on, the majority of them, 90% of them, will be, governed by what they call a strata title, where it's, the basis of community living. Now, the interesting thing about that, when you talk about what's on title, that's registered with the Land Titles Office. So that's your property, my name against the title.
Absolutely.
And it's not that uncommon though to have part of an area, say a garden or a balcony, or you said it before, a garage, that's actually exclusive use. Do you want to tell?
Yeah, so exclusive use basically means that the majority has made the decision in that owner's corporation to grant you the exclusive use of that space.
And it's common property though, isn't it?
It's common property, so it can be taken away.
Yeah.
So if you get another majority rule that says, no, we're actually taking that away, it's no longer yours.
Yeah.
So it's important to distinguish between the two. If it's part of the lot, the strata plan will show it's part of the lot. If it's a bylaw that's set up exclusive use, it should be clear in the contract with a plan to understand that. So always look for those things. Don't make assumptions that, oh yeah, that's the garage, or or even when you've been shown this is the garage, check the plan, make sure it's the garage.
Or the numbers on the garage
may not relate.
And it may not relate to the actual block. So you may walk around the block and say, oh, that's unit number 5 and I'm buying unit number 5, so that's the garage. And in fact, especially for a lot of these older proproperties in older suburbs, like Manly or Fairlight, they were developed a long time ago and the building might have been built and the garage might have been built at a different time.
Yeah, and it's entirely, when the strata was created, they, I forgot about the garages or did something.
Yeah.
And so you need to just make sure that you can tick some boxes, and that's where knowledge is critical. So again, anyone that's out there in buying land, I think our agents are pretty skilled in this space, and it's great for you to ask questions. Really discover about every property that you're into, because it is a minefield.
Yeah.
And let's now talk about agent talk, because that's an even bigger minefield.
Well, it almost goes with terminology, because agent talk, when we say agent talk, it's good to ask an agent a couple of key questions as well. Obviously, if you're a buyer, going out there, people want to know how long's it been on the market, and have you had any offers? Are they disclosing those offers as well? Have those offers been in writing?
Yeah.
Really the big one as well, as to whether the agent's just saying we've got interest at this level, or do they have an offer, a written offer.
Because this is pretty much the rules of engagement, isn't it? If you can enter into something, understand how are you going to be dealt with, and how an offer is going to be dealt with. How is this going to roll out? Because the last thing you want to get to is a complete confusion state of going, well, I thought this or I thought that. Get it up front. Find out exactly where it sits, because quite frankly, when it comes down to multiple buyers, we've had probably 12 months where we haven't seen too many. Yeah. But the last 4 weeks, quite common.
Back. Yeah.
So we're getting buyers starting to compete again.
Yeah.
And so it's not just a buyer's market where this can happen. So you'll get people re-engaging with a property, and and what's the most common term that people ask about? Gazumping.
Gazumping.
It's a term that actually says, okay, you've had an offer accepted on a property, but it's not exchanged yet. Yeah. And the reality is we're legally bound by law to submit every single offer we get up to the point of exchange. We cannot avoid that obligation, so therefore the law is actually promoting gazumping.
Yeah, it's ironic, because most people and a lot of buyers get confused by the term that my offer's been accepted, okay, but they don't understand that actually the property legally remains on the market until you sign the contract, you pay a deposit, which is legal tender, and then you date those contracts, which have to be identical. Both the buyer and the seller contract have to be identical.
And then
you physically turn them over, and that's an exchange. And then only then is the property legally off the market.
And then you've got your cooling off and you've got your unconditional, where you provide the 66W. So the whole idea behind the cooling off was to enable people that, Andrew, we've successfully negotiated the sale of the property. How do we secure it? Sign here. Yep. And it was, the whole idea was that, okay, yes, if you want to take it to your solicitor, you're running the risk of another buyer coming in still. Now, you could argue the point, well, isn't that an honourable thing for a vendor to say, oh no, sorry, I accepted your offer.
The moral obligation.
Moral obligation, but unfortunately, it's not our decision.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, money does talk.
Yeah.
At $10,000, there's very few people who would say no to $10,000.
Yeah.
Even less people that would say no to $20,000
or $50,000.
Or $50,000. It can be any number. Some people do. And I think that's quite incredible, and I love that fact that that's what happens, and when people make that decision. Yeah. But we're in a real world here, and every dollar is someone's hard-earned tender at some point, and they need to do something with it. So we're very conscious of that fact, and we try and advise people to make sure that don't just assume you're the only person here. Make sure you get that through as quickly as possible. On that front, what percentage do you think our properties are actually doing the cooling off at the moment? Quite a lot.
I'd say it used to be only about 10%. Especially when the market's running hot. You wouldn't have a choice. You'd have to go unconditional, which, again, there's a conditional contract and then there's an unconditional contract. and that means whether you exchange with, as John said, a cooling off period, or whether you exchange with the full 10% deposit and a 66W certificate, which waives those cooling off periods. Now we're doing about a third of our transactions with cooling off periods for private treaty properties, not auction campaigns.
So you wouldn't do that prior to auction, would you?
No, you rarely would happen unless it was extenuating circumstances, between both the vendor and the buyer. Now, if we fast forward that, from, let's say you're successful and you have exchanged those contracts, there's a period between when you've dated that contract and when you actually get a chance to have the keys and move in. And that on the contract is known as completion date. But it's also known in agent talk or talk in the market as your settlement term.
Yep.
Okay, the settlement, when you get a chance to grab the keys and move into the property, or a chance where you get to lease it out. Now, a vanilla settlement period, John, would be, what, 6 weeks? 42 days. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that's set in stone, does it? Because
it depends on, and particularly these days with finance issues, we're trying to get these things through as quickly as possible and getting people to do all their due diligence up front before they even go looking at properties.
Yeah.
But sometimes people commit before getting the final approval, and then they come unstuck in the period between exchange and completion.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can push that time out. So there is a thing called notice to complete. So if you get to the end of the settlement period and you haven't completed, the vendor can serve on the purchaser a 14-day notice to complete period.
And that's it. That's final.
That's it. It becomes time is of the essence. Is what happens at that after that 14 days, and penalty interest kicks in that 14 days as well. And if you don't settle at the end of that 14 days, you forfeit your deposit.
The full 10%.
Full 10%, and if you've only paid 5%, you can be sued for the balance. And in extenuating circumstances, if someone has done that and they haven't been able to complete, and the property sells for even less than that, they can be sued for the difference. So it's a really important thing to make sure you get your finance in place up front. And if you have any concerns about that, you try and get an extended settlement, which is what is happening with a lot of people at the moment, particularly those that are buying before they sell. They've got to get significant time frames in which to work. Right. So I think when you look at these things, it all is telling you, don't treat this lightly.
Yeah. Get the right advice.
Get the right advice.
And if we backtrack just for a moment around the offer process as well, because particularly most sellers will become buyers. So it's good for them to know, for all the people who are looking to sell out there, this might be useful information on what you'll be experiencing on your own homes. But if a buyer wants to buy your property, and the agent says, look, we've got a few offers, and then the buyer asks the agent, what are they? And they say, we can't disclose the offers. Is that legal?
Look, everything's legal in that space. It's about the rules of engagement. Yes. So in other words, we have a transparency based philosophy around this.
Yep.
That we're the belief that if our job in the marketplace for our sellers is to get the best possible result from the marketplace. The way we feel that we can do that is by being transparent and open with the marketplace.
So disclose.
There's our rules. Yeah. This is how it plays with us, and this is how it is. So we'll get a buyer, for example, say, I want to make this offer, but I don't want it disclosed to anyone. And it's like, okay, well, I understand that may be your position. However, therefore, I imagine you don't want me to disclose other offers to you.
So playing in the dark ages.
It is. It is.
Going back to the cloak and dagger.
Yeah. And so for us, it's sort of like, and when often you say, like, oh, yeah, I get it, One rule for me doesn't apply. And
so let's take the same scenario. They say, well, I want to make an offer, but John, I don't want to get into a Dutch auction. How many times have you heard that?
Yeah. Cheese auction.
Yeah.
Dutch cheese, Eden cheese.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that the Dutch auction, I guess traditionally, is actually where you start at a high number, you come down until someone puts their hand up, and then they get it.
Yeah.
What I think most people refer to when they say a Dutch auction, which is really like an auction before the auction, really.
Which it is, exactly. It's like, okay, I'll make an offer on the property, and I'll make another one, and then I'll make another one. And because I'm bidding against someone else, it's an auction before an auction. That's all it is. It's not a Dutch auction. It's simply an auction before an auction.
Because I guess from a buyer's perspective, they probably need to understand as well that the role of the agent, in most cases, well, it should be every case, is to get the highest price the market's willing to pay for the vendor. So ultimately, if they are in that scenario, they have to respect the fact that the agent's going to do their very best to get the best price in an ethical, transparent manner.
Absolutely, and it goes back to the core common law premise of what an agent is.
Yes.
And this is something I think a lot of people forget. An agent is the person, the principal they're acting for.
Yes.
They are them. In other words, they're taking their whole responsibility that I'm acting as you would. And that's what an agent's definition is. So therefore, what our obligations are clearly to our vendor. However, a really good agent understands that yes, that's their primary obligation, but their other overarching obligation is to what we call the community, and the community is everybody else.
Yeah.
So how do you achieve that? You achieve that with transparency. You achieve it so that there's no cloak and daggers, there's no hidden smoke and mirrors going on here. So from our perspective, that's the approach that we've always taken, isn't it? That we go, you know what, it's clear for us what our obligations are. But also to fulfil those obligations, I have to look after you as the buyer and make you in a place where you're in the right environment to make the right offers, but understand the rules of engagement. So when we talk about agent speak, it's sort of going, okay, make sure you understand what's this agent's rules, how they're going about the processes, and don't assume anything.
Yeah. So when you ask an agent, are they taking offers prior? What does that look like?
Correct.
It's that next step further. So will you be disclosing offers or not? Do you take offers in writing?
Contracts only, what is it?
Exactly. Is the offer on an unconditional contract, meaning it has to be a check, signed contract, here's my best offer? Or is it, okay, I'll take an offer over email or text, and then it's subject to that being done. So all of these little things we could probably go on about for days. But
we could.
I think for everyone's purpose, hopefully this has been insightful, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So
this is important. We love questions. We love giving answers because our primary role is to guide you in the right direction to make a good decision, both buyers and sellers. So information's king. So if anything you come up with, please make a comment and on Facebook or wherever you're seeing this video, and we'd love to help out. So thanks everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next Friday.
Thank you.